Welcome to the channel. My name is Kubeir. I'm a CICC licensed immigration consultant. This channel is all about Canadian immigration news, updates, things you should do, things you definitely should not. This video is about express entry applications. And before I get to that, to everybody who's celebrating, wish you a very, very blessed Eid. Eid Mubarak to all of you who are celebrating. This is obviously a great occasion. So enjoy your day and obviously gorge on all those firnis and sweetmeats that you've been waiting for. But talking about express entry, very recently, 21,000 invitations were issued over a span of 2 weeks. And from there on, then we had another express entry draw, 3,500 invitations issued. So in total, there are about 24,500 people out there somewhere who are in the process of completing their applications. And because I do a lot of consultations, and there are so many times people are perplexed, overwhelmed, in seriously stressed out with all these different issues. Sometimes those are really a concern. Sometimes it's not so much a concern, but they are really stressing out because they read some blog, they read some YouTube, or they heard some YouTube video, they read on a Facebook group post, etc., and therefore they get totally stressed out. And in that stress, sometimes they make a bigger mistake than they shouldn't have. So this video, I want to concise a lot of common mistakes that I have known of, common things, common questions that people usually ask, so that if you are one of them who is facing a similar situation, then you will be able to sort this out quickly. First things first, as you already are aware, IRCC is currently on strike. More than 100,000 members of PSAC, Public Service Alliance of Canada, are now on strike, including IRCC, IRCC, CRA, ESDC, which is Employment and Social Development of Canada, which is your Service Canada. All these departments are on strike, and therefore processing will be impacted, no doubt about it. But that does not mean that you should not submit your application on time. You, on the other hand, have no extension or leeway in delaying your application. Nothing. If you do not submit a mandatory document, then your application will definitely be rejected. So please don't make that mistake. Please do not assume that you will be given an extra time at any point of time. So just make sure you submit a complete application within the 60 days period of your application deadline. First things first, that is one of the biggest questions that is coming up, based on which a lot of people also decline their ITAs, and that is having less than 1 year of continuous full-time work experience in your primary knock code. Now, these are two different variables here, two different variations. First of all, if you're a Canadian experience class, which most of you may be, you do not need a continuous work experience to be eligible under express entry, because your Canadian experience class, which basically means you could have multiple knock codes, multiple job periods, multiple employments. You could have 12 periods of different employment, different employers, different knock code, as long as all of those knock codes are valid. And you are, of course, paid for it. So therefore, as a Canadian experience class, what you choose as your primary knock code does not matter, as long as, of course, you have valid work experience in that knock code and you have shown it in your work history. But for the federal skilled worker program, federal skilled trade categories, this is a very, very big issue. So therefore, if you're a federal skilled worker program candidate, you definitely have to have at least 1 year of continuous work experience within the last 10 years. That is a mandatory requirement. If you somehow choose your primary knock code, or if you change your primary knock code to a knock code in which you do not have a continuous work experience, then this is what impacts your eligibility right off the bat. Your application will be refused 100%. There is no going around it. So please always choose your knock code in which you have the most amount of continuous work experience, not the most recent, doesn't have to be that. In the amount where you have the longest period of continuous work experience, because that is what gives you your eligibility points. That 67 points barometer, that's where you get it from. And therefore, please choose your primary knock code sensibly. Also, obviously, you should have corresponding work history for that same knock code in your work history. So this I'm talking about the primary knock code, which appears first when you're entering your work history. So this is one of the biggest concerns. A lot of people make a lot of changes after they have received their ITA. Sometimes they change their primary knock code, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly, because they're fiddling with the drop-down menu and bang, they click on something which is not relevant, and that's the end of their application. So don't make that mistake. Don't be that person. Changes post receiving an ITA. Oh, sorry, before I get onto that, there's another one which obviously concerns a lot of people, and this is primarily the Canadian experience class, and which is you having received an ITA without you having completed 1 year of work experience. I have said this so many times, you don't need to decline your ITA. You can absolutely continue with your work with your PR application. Just make sure that you complete your period of work experience and then submit. So basically what happens is the system, express entry system, which is obviously not the perfect system. It is a bit flawed in the sense of how it calculates your work experience. So it calculates month, year. Okay. So the starting period of your work experience, it starts from the first of that month, and the ending period of your work experience, it ends on the first day of that month. So it basically gives you your credit for your work experience 1 month before you actually complete that period of work experience. It's not your problem. It's not misrepresentation. You did not disclose or declare anything incorrectly. Therefore, please do not freak out. Please do not worry about all those agents, consultants, blogs, posts that you see that you have to decline. You don't have to decline. You can continue. IRCC themselves on several Twitter accounts elsewhere have said that this is a system glitch. They are aware about it. If you have received an ITA, please continue with your application, but submit only after you complete your period of valid work experience, because, hey, this is where you have control. It's not the system fault anymore. If you submit an application before having completed 1 year of work experience, at least, for which you're claiming points, then you are in trouble. So don't do that. Don't be that person. Changes post receiving an ITA. This is another commonly asked question. And this is where a lot of people freak out. A lot of people decline their ITAs. A lot of people fall into the situation where they are completely stressed out. I've just had one consultation 2 days back where a licensed consultant, an IRCC, actually gave them incorrect information, incorrect advice. So what happened basically is that this person had incorrectly mentioned their name on the express entry profile. So for example, if my name is Kubeir Kamal, then and if, let's say, I also had a middle name, let's say my middle name was Kubeir Kamal. I'm just going for the heck of it, right? Maybe I did not state my name correctly in the express entry profile. Let's say I entered all of my names, or rather I split them, but my passport says all my names as my first name, which is quite a common thing with the Indian passports, right? Let's say, for example, you are Gurdeep Singh, and your entire name will be shown as the first name. Your last name will be blank. But when you are entering your express entry profile, let's say you split your name. You put first name as Gurdeep, you put Singh in your last name. And now after the ITA, when you're completing your application, now you've realized, oh my God, what have I done? Or somebody told you. And then somebody says, decline your ITA because this is incorrect information. You fed it incorrectly. No, don't decline your ITA, guys. Don't treat your ITAs so carelessly. Don't treat it. So it's extremely fragile, and obviously the express entry draws are so inconsistent, so unpredictable. If you decline your ITA, you might not get it again. We don't know what's going to happen with express entry draws now with the strike looming, whether the draws will happen, whether they will not happen. It's like on everybody's mind, plus unpredictability anyways. So don't do that. What you can do is, in your express entry profile, right on top, there is a tab where it says modify family information. Everybody has it, everybody's application. Just click on that. You can go into your own profile. You can change your name. You can change the way the name has been formatted. You can change from spouse accompanying to non-accompanying. You can make all these changes. If IRCC didn't want you to make these changes, then you wouldn't have been able to do it, right? So your express entry profile is locked. You can't make any changes in that. But in your PR application, which you now have a separate entry, which you'll click on continue button and then complete this application, you can make these changes. There is no problem. This is not misrepresentation. You're not doing anything illegal. Misrepresentation, I will explain to you what it basically means. But for the time being, let's talk about changes post receiving an ITA. You can make this change. Okay, this is the first one. Second one is changes in job title. For example, I was a business analyst, but when I got my reference letter, it says analyst. Can I make this change? Yes, you can. Let's say name of the employer. My employer's name was Ask Kubeir Immigration Inc. But I entered only Ask Kubeir. Can I make the change and add Immigration Inc.? Yes, you can. There is no problem. Let's say in my express entry profile, I entered the information that I started my work experience in January of 2018 until September of 2021. But now that I've received my documents, I have realized I didn't start in January. I started in February. Can I make this change? Yes, you can. There is no problem. You see, these are not impacting your scores. This is not impacting your eligibility. This is not impacting anything. These are small errors, spelling mistakes, name changes, name of your company, completely changing the name of your company because let's say it has been bought over by some other company. It has been amalgamated with a different company, merged with a different company. All these changes are absolutely fine. There is no problem. Please go ahead and make it. At most, if you're really stressed out, go ahead and provide a letter of explanation. In the letter of explanation, you will explain why did you make the change, and that sort of keeps you in the clear, because you already told the visa officer what the whole situation is, and that's fine. It's not misrepresentation. Don't worry about it. Don't freak out. And another biggest one that absolutely foxes people out, and that one is change of knock code. Can you change your knock code after getting an ITA? Yes, you can. I have done it so many times that I've even forgotten how many times, because often we will have clients who have received their ITA and then they come to us and say, can you handle our application? And the first thing once we start looking at their application is to check their work experience, because hey, this is one of the most important factors. And we realize that the knock code that they have chosen is incorrect. So what do? We go ahead and change the knock code. Okay, because we can do it. Because you see, express entry draws are not based on your knock code. They are based on your eligibility and your CRS code. That is not impacting. So therefore, changing a knock code is not a problem. Again, add a letter of explanation telling the visa officer that once I received the ITA, I reviewed my work experience, I reviewed my documentation, I realized that XYZ knock code was a better match, and hence I made the change. Now, when you're changing your knock code, again, very, very important. Let's say you only have one work experience. Let's say your work experience is only for 4 years, one company, only one single line. Earlier, your knock code was 21231, which is software engineers, but now you realize it's 21222, analysts or whatever. So you go ahead and change your knock code in your work history, but you forgot that the primary knock code was 21231 and you didn't make the change there. This will get your application refused. Please do not make that big mistake. If you're changing a knock code, make sure you change the primary knock code as well as the relevant work experience knock code, in order to keep it consistent. Because keep in mind that knock code that I told you about, primary knock code, is where your eligibility is established. So don't make that mistake. Please, if you're changing knock codes, please make sure you do a corresponding change. So this is about post receiving an ITA. These are the changes you can absolutely do. There is no problem with it. Next one, not providing intention to reside outside of Quebec. There are a lot of people who are living in Quebec and they are told that you cannot apply for express entry because you're living in Quebec. That is absolutely wrong. They're also told that your work experience in Quebec will not be eligible. That is absolutely not true. That is wrong. That is incorrect. That is misleading. Your work experience across Canada, no matter which province, no matter which territory, no matter which city, is acceptable, including even if it was in Quebec. Even if you were an LMIA work permit, it is acceptable even if it is Quebec. The only thing is that your intention has to be to reside outside Quebec. That is the most important. You cannot apply through express entry if your intention is to reside in Quebec. So do not also make a mistake of mentioning, when it asks you where would you want to live in Canada, don't choose Quebec, because if you do that, your application gets refused. So please, if you live in Quebec, you can submit your application. There is no problem, but you do have to intend to reside outside Quebec as part of your application. You also have to be able to prove and provide evidence, if possible, or supporting documentation, affidavit at most, to say that you would leave Quebec and you would live outside Quebec. And at times IRCC may come back to you and ask you for an update. Have you moved? Did you told us in your application you're going to move? Have you moved? So be prepared for that. But absolutely, as long as you intend to reside outside of Quebec, you are fine to submit your application in express entry. Waiting too long to submit. Now, this is another problem that I've seen. There are people who wait right until the 60th day to submit the application, and then they freak out. System goes down, system crashes, there are problems with the system, or they realize they haven't done some small thing, or they're having a problem with the payment portal, or their credit card doesn't go through, or their debit card doesn't go through, and they freak out. They do not know what to do, because bang, come the 60th day, then their timeline is over, and then the system freezes for them, and therefore they cannot submit their application anymore. Also, what people don't realize is the 60th day ends as per the UTC time zone, not as per your local time zone, not as per the EST, Eastern Standard Time Zone, not as per the Mountain or Pacific Time Zone. The deadline for all Canadian immigration applications is always that day, UTC time zone, midnight of UTC. All right, so people confuse that as well. They think it is their local time zone. It is not. This applies to all immigration applications: study permit, visit visas, work permits. If it says the deadline, if it shows when your work permit expires, if it shows when your period expires, if it gives you any deadline whatsoever, that is midnight of UTC midnight of that particular date. So your 60th day will end at the 12 a.m. UTC, sorry, 11:59 UTC of that particular date. So please be careful of that and always submit your application on time. Otherwise, you might just face a lot of problems. Employment letters that don't prove work experience. What do I mean? I mean, of course, if it's an employment letter, it proves your work experience, right? No, it does not. So many times you will provide an experience letter. Experience letter just states Kubeir Kamal was working for us, Kubeir Immigration, from 2018 till 2021. That's it. And he was working as an immigration consultant. He was 40 hours a week. He was paid. That's it. But how does IRCC know that the knock code that you have chosen of a software developer actually was matching with this role as immigration consultant? Now you see, there are hundreds and thousands and millions of job titles across the world, and everybody globally is applying for Express Entry or your applications. The only way for IRCC to validate your knock code is if you were to give them a set of job descriptions, and not you giving it to them, but your employer validating it and verifying it and saying this is his job description. And then IRCC will match that job description with the knock code that you have chosen, and therefore verify and validate your work experience. Hey, we've already been talking about the validity, right? So your eligibility is established based on your work experience. You get CRS points based on your work experience, and that work experience basically means it is paid, valid knock code, and for the period of work. So your job description, so your employment letter has to establish these three very, very important factors. One, obviously that it is you, right? And it is for you. The period of work. So from which period to which period were you working? That's extremely important. How many hours? Because hours, if it is less than 30 hours, it becomes part-time. It impacts the period of work. So it has to mention which period of time you were working for. Second, it has to establish whether you are being paid. So your salary has to be mentioned. If it doesn't mention your salary, then you can always provide pay slips, pay stubs, job offer letter, and other documents. But you have to be able to establish that you are paid. And third and most important is your job description, which validates your knock code. These are the three main important things that they're looking for in your work reference letters. Because work reference letters comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes and formats. So there is no perfect format, or there is no IRCC format. Any format in any which ways that it is written, as long as it's in your company letterhead signed by your boss or your authorized signatory and includes this information, then it's fine. I also recommend to add additional documents in your work experience. Always remember, more is less, which basically means no matter how much you provide, it is still less. So this is you trying, this is your one-time opportunity. You're not going to be applying for PR again and again, hopefully not, right? And you only want to become Canadian PR once and then obviously become a citizen later. So this is your one-time opportunity. So more is less. Pay slips, pay stubs, bank statements that show salary credit, income tax returns. Please add this as part of your proof of remuneration, proof of salary. It's extremely important. Sometimes they will ask you for it. So why waste your time later on? Just provide it upfront. It's always going to add more credibility into your application. I know there are a lot of other people who are not able to get employment reference letters. So please keep in mind, if you do not provide a reference letter, then you are basically telling IRCC, I cannot have you validate my work experience. Hence, they are absolutely right in refusing your application. So please provide a good comprehensive reference letters. If your company is refusing to provide it to you, provide a communication with your company where they said we will not give it to you. So a denial email, a company HR policy. Then go and get it from your manager, get it from your supervisor, have them write your job description and your employment reference letters. I do not recommend co-workers, because co-workers, you're not reporting to your co-workers. Your co-worker cannot say these are the job description that you were performing, and therefore co-workers is never a good idea. Managers, supervisors, team leads always works. Yeah, and get that document notarized. Now there is no requirement for notary, because IRCC is not giving you the alternative document conditions, right? So there is no requirement for notary. The reason we recommend notary is because in Canada, a notarized document has a very high credibility, has a very high level of acceptance, and therefore it gives a lot of weight, and hence we ask you to notarize. If you cannot even get a document from your manager supervisor, then what do? You are really in bad space then. Well, you can get your offer letter. In your offer letter, the job description is mentioned, or your company's HR policies, or ask your company to give you your job description. But you have to provide the job description. Self-declaration or saying I was doing this, this, and this, hey, that doesn't work, because I can say I was flying an aircraft, I'm a pilot, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor. I could say anything for myself. How does that prove? So you always need a third-party proof for something like this. Of course, there is a different set of documents for self-employed individuals, because you also need to now prove that you are owner of the business and that you are dealing with your clients. Your clients have to provide you with the reference letters. Your clients have to prove and validate your job experience, your work period, how many hours you were working for them, what was your job description, what all were you performing, what all were you providing as services. And of course, then you also have to provide invoices, payment vouchers, bank statements of the business, income tax returns of the business, and provide that this business was generating revenue. Profit or loss is not the criteria, generating revenue is the criteria. So obviously, self-employed documentation becomes a bit more complex than this, but at the end of the day, as long as you can prove three factors, as I said, I'm repeating this again, the period of work, the job description, and that you were paid for it, you are absolutely fine with your work experience documents. Police clearance certificates, it has been the biggest reason why applications get rejected and refused. Your police clearance certificates, first of all, this is the only document that is required for you to provide in color scan. That is a requirement. Even if it's a black and white, do a color scan. A lot of people say Indian PCCs are black and white. Well, yes, I know they are black and white, but the stamp and the signature is in color. So please provide it a color scan of that document. Also, police clearances have to completely include your entire duration of stay in that country. The PCCs that are from your country of current residence, those are valid for 6 months unless otherwise stated on that police clearance. Any other country where you have lived for 6 months or more in a row, or after your 18 years of age within the last 10 years, you have to provide a police clearance for those countries. Please provide a police clearance after you have left that country. In most cases, excuse me, in most cases, that police clearance will remain valid until you return back to that country. And if you return back to that country even for 1 hour, then the police clearance is no longer valid. Now, I know what the IRCC website says. I know the IRCC website says for 6 months, if you have gone back to that country, and you only need to give it for 6 months or more if you have lived there again for 6 months or more in a row. But trust me, I have seen so many refusals from applications where people said, hey, I do not know, I don't need another PCC because I did not live in that country again for 6 months or more in a row. But then IRCC has come back and said that's not your country of residence. And it needs to include the entire duration of your stay in that country. Hence, we are refusing your application. And then, yes, you can keep banging doors, you can appeal, you can go for judicial review if you want to and challenge that in the court. But until we see a case law where the court has said, no, this does not apply, I would always recommend, please, if you are living in a country which is not your country of residence, always get a police clearance from after your last visit, after you have left that country, not even when you're in that country. After you have left that country, get a police clearance from outside that country. It remains valid until your next visit. If, let's say, 6 months have passed, 1 year has passed from that stay, that PCC date, then add a cover letter to that document stating that, hey, I got this PCC when I was outside that country. I've never gone back. This PCC is please still valid. If you still need it, I will give you another one. But that's the cover letter you can add. And in my experience, those usually have always gone through, no problem at all. Another big one is proof of funds. Now, I know we can make a whole new video or big video on proof of funds because it's such a detailed or complex subject. But at the end of the day, what you're required to prove is, first of all, that you have sufficient funds available. First of all, proof of funds is required only for federal skilled workers and for federal skilled trade category. Canadian experience class does not need proof of funds. If you're being asked for proof of funds, upload a plain document stating that you are Canadian experience class. You don't need to provide proof of funds. If you have an LMIA approved job offer, or if you have an arranged job offer, even in those situations, you do not need to provide proof of funds. But for federal skilled workers, for the rest of us, you need to provide proof of funds where you have to show that you have enough suitable funds available, which can be encashed, which can be liquidated on demand and on cash value, or on the face value of the document, and that you can provide as proof of funds. The proof of funds counts for the number of members in your family. Your family means you, your spouse or partner, and your children, dependent children. Your parents and your brothers, sisters, they do not count as part of your family for the immigration application. So if you are married to, or if you are partners, then 2, you have children, then 3, 4, 5, depending on how many children you have to provide proof of funds for the entire family. regardless whether your family is accompanying you in your application or not. People make that mistake as well. Sometimes they show their family as unaccompanying because they do not have sufficient proof of funds, but you do have to provide for the whole family. Now, it also happens, currency devaluation happens. It is happening all the time. It is happening with so many countries. So if you are one of those people whose currency you are afraid will devalue or has devalued, then again, it's a recommendation. And I've used this a lot for clients who come out of Pakistan, Egypt, Nigeria, and some other countries and of course in India as well, where the currency devaluation happens, and sometimes where the proof of funds is absolutely on the border, right? For example, single person needs 13,310. If my client has only 13,500, then I'm already worried that during the course of the application, the currency might devalue. Now, there is always this debate whether IRCC locks the exchange rate when you submit your application or when they will assess your application. In my experience, I have seen that they check the exchange rate when they are assessing the application, not when you submitted the application. So I always go as per that. I always recommend the clients to have additional funds available in your account. And in order to overcome the currency devaluation, what I do is, as part of my application documentation, I add the Bank of Canada or the Reserve Bank of Canada, Reserve Bank of that country's, or any big banks of that country's exchange rate on the day I'm submitting the application, to show that as per the exchange rate on this and this date, the client had sufficient funds in their account to meet the threshold of the proof of funds. And that has usually worked. In so many cases, the currency has devalued, I haven't done anything, and the application has gone because I have provided proof of what the exchange rate was on the day I'm submitting the application. So you can do the same thing. Gift deeds, etc. I'm going to talk about it in this video because that is, as I said, completely different subject. But if your funds are not in your account within the last 6 months, they are being deposited into your account, then you have to provide proof or evidence as to where did the money come from. You also have to disclose all your loans and liabilities. It's not a problem to have a loan or liability. You just need to be able to explain to IRCC how will you clear out your loans and liabilities without that impacting your proof of funds. So that's all the need is. But yes, proof of funds is an important document. I have seen applications getting refused because of inappropriate documents or not being able to establish clearly. Last but not the least, misrepresentation. What does it even mean? Misrepresentation basically means when you are providing or not providing material information which will directly influence the visa officer in making a decision which would have been different had you provided them the required information or document. That's what misrepresentation means. So if you're changing a bit of a spelling mistake, that's not misrepresentation. If you're changing a knock code, that's not misrepresentation. If you're completing your application because you got the ITA sooner, but you're completing it after your work experience is completed, that is not misrepresentation. Not disclosing your previous visa refusals is misrepresentation because you're trying to hide that information so that the visa officer thinks you have no other refusal. Previous visa refusals could also be because of inadmissibilities. For example, maybe drunk driving or criminal assault or criminality. If you're not providing police clearance, then you're basically, if you're not providing, disclosing your previous refusals, then you may also be hiding some other information. And therefore, IRCC considers not disclosing your prior refusals as part of your PR applications as a very, very serious issue, and also considers it as misrepresentation. Your application will be refused and you may also get a 5-year ban. In addition to that, false documentation or false claims, fraudulent documents, fraudulent IELTS, fraudulent WS reports, fraudulent work experience documents, fraudulent proof of fund documents, all of these are misrepresentation. Fake job offers, getting LMIAs or buying and selling LMIAs and getting those, if you obtain them fraudulently, all of that is misrepresentation because you wouldn't have received the ITA in the first place had you not had that. Plus, you got them fraudulently and hence that's a problem. All this is misrepresentation. As I said, that will bring you a 5-year ban in addition to refusal. That, my friends, are the different problems that you can face in your express entry applications. I have gone through most of them. I'm sure there are tons and tons more, and they can never end because there are so many different people who have so many different issues, but I've covered by and large majority of it. If you have other questions, I know I can see a lot of questions. I'm not able to answer the questions because I have to hop onto a consultation. Actually, I'm late for that consultation already and I have to hop onto that one. But if you have questions, please, by all means, drop it in the comment box under the video. I will come back and try and answer as many questions as possible. Of course, if you want our services to handle your application, that is the email. By all means, drop us an email. We'll be happy to take over your application and obviously not make these mistakes. If you wish to make an appointment one-on-one, then this is the link. We can discuss your issues, your stresses, your questions, your queries, and then sort them out. Thank you very much for joining in. This was me one time again. Eid Mubarak, and I wish you all the very best. Take care.